Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Can paranormal parasites, popularly known as demons, be killed? Has there been a spike in UFO sightings since the coronavirus began? What do you do if you're quarantined in a haunted house?
So welcome to the 838th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, and those unique to a pandemic questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal and dad, Paul. And today we bring you an open line show on all kinds of things we never expected to be talking about. And we welcome your calls today. The number is 401-766-1240. That's from anywhere. Or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or contact us by Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
So we are sad that Shane Sirois, our favorite guest co-host, who's always on these open line shows, is not with us in the studio. However, we're happy that he is with us via Skype. You know, I don't know what we'd do right now without the internet. We'd be back in the 19th century.
Well, it's kind of funny. I saw this picture, and it was this guy that looked like very worried, and the caption was, all of the internet companies, when people finally use the internet they pay for. And I thought that was really funny, because most people don't use their internet all the time because they're working out of their house or whatever, and now everyone's home, and it's like putting a ton of stress on everyone's bandwidth.
Well, so Shane, welcome to your broadcast home, and we're happy to have you with us, at least one way or the other.
I'm happy to be back in these strange times.
Yeah, strange is right. Well, speaking of strange, let's get right into our open line format here with our emails and
who
communications.
doesn't love emails, huh?
Yeah, right, especially now. Okay, well, I guess it's appropriate to begin with one from Phil, one of our Connecticut reporters. And take it away, Ben.
Yes. Phil writes to us. Just a thought. I remember your earlier shows about a major upheaval occurring between 2012 and 2016. Perhaps in this section of the multiverse, I am wondering if that is happening now with the coronavirus.
All right. Well, I mean, I have to really stress that we do not make predictions. We will share hunches and thoughts and perhaps prognostications with people.
It's probably more of an estimated guess.
Well, yeah. I mean, just the whole thing, I suppose, stemmed from the 2012 issue. You know, if people remember back then, which is 8 years ago now, that on December 21st, 2012, the world was going to end. That was the popular interpretation of the end of the Mayan calendar for that particular period. That's really not what it said, if it said anything about it. And what do you mean by the world ending? I mean, the whole thing just goes poof, people disappear. I mean, what does that even mean? So based on that, I suggested, and there was mainly from, having been a journalist for almost 41 years now, but then, a long time too. Just looking at the whole landscape, the international situation, the this and that. I had suggested that maybe parasites might take advantage of certain things, as they always do, and that there might be some great upheaval. And you can't argue. I talked to some people that the world, in a way, kind of did end in 2012. The whole political landscape changed. Everything changed, seemingly. And I guess that depends on your point of view. But I think that's what it came out. But as far as the current situation, this was a ticking time bomb anyway. I know there's a lot being made right now of Bill Gates having said 5 years ago that the biggest threat is a global pandemic. 35 years ago in the military, they were telling us that kind of thing. And whether it be an accidental pandemic, if you believe in accidents at all, or a biowarfare sort of thing, it was a danger. It was just a matter of time. So I wasn't making any prognostications about that. Shane, Ben, what do you fellas say?
You first, Shane.
Oh, yield. I got nothing.
No.
Okay.
Nothing.
That's
I'm not going to top anything either one of you guys say on that topic. So.
All right.
I suppose anything is inevitable, right? Like an asteroid. I think within the last few months there have been 5 asteroids within distance of striking the Earth or something like that.
Yeah, kind of close shave sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, at any point in time, anything can happen. There's that sort of, if there's one sort of, well, there's actually a couple of odd silver linings to everything that's happening, not to be insensitive.
Of course.
But this is a really great reminder of how fragile everything is.
Yes.
And, our daily lives, although, albeit I see little to no difference in my daily life, but that's just because of how I live. But this has been a great disturbance to a lot of other people's daily routines and lives and, their health. And it's amazing how one disease could make such a huge impact on everything, What if it was, a nuclear disaster? What if it was, a robot uprising or something like that? Not to get hyperbolic, but oddly enough, a lot of these, these disasters that can happen could happen at any moment.
Yeah, and it's very fragile.
Oh yeah, and it's a great reminder of that. And I think as a species, it's oddly beneficial. So that way we kind of sort of grow some sort of discernment for how to live our lives.
Yes. I think some good will come out of this, but again, it is very fragile, or as Darren McGavin's character said in The Christmas Story, fragile. But,
yes. Must be Italian.
Yeah, right. So
and it goes without saying that Mother Nature sure has time to heal too during this time, which is positive if there is one.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of them.
Yeah, true. Okay, well, let's move on to something completely different here. This is from Doug from Texas.
Ready.
From Facebook.
So Doug writes to us, you have mentioned on multiple occasions that paranormal parasites can be killed. You have also mentioned the Aztec shaman who dealt with the parasite and wound up with scratches as a result. Given the aforementioned and Paul's physical altercation with the parasite in Bridgeport, have any of you gentlemen met someone who has actually killed one of these things?
Okay, well, let me just qualify that by saying that I have written in a couple of the books and have mentioned on the air that I've speculated that they might be able to be killed, because if they depend, as we believe, on sustenance, sucking the energy, if you will, from people, then if they don't have any sustenance, I have seen them go dormant for long periods, particularly when they're attached to the land, but I don't know for sure if any can be killed, and I always qualify that by saying whatever meaning killed or death could have in a multiverse, again, if that point of view is correct, in a multiverse in which there are so many versions of everything, including parasites, how can you even die in that situation? So I mean, that's the background from which Shane, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I agree. Like, there's no way for us to really know, but like you said, we do take what from them. This is how I get rid of them, is when I go to the homes. That's how you guys do, is you take away from them what they're taking from the host, and so their food, if that's what we want to call it. But so it's basically it's fear, it's like a lowered emotional state of being, and then attention that we give to this. So we take those three things away, and these things will go find, that source somewhere else. And I have ran into the same one, different locations. Quite a few times, actually. And so they will move on and find it somewhere else. So, but it's really hard to tell where they're able to move on to something else. I mean, because they're coming and going. They're a life form, and they can come and go from wherever they come from, and they can pop in. And so if they can pop in here, they can pop in over there and to look for food. So as long as there's people out there that are going to give it attention, there's that are going to, there's a lot of fear in this world, no matter what direction you look, and then also troubling times for everyone, people with that lowered emotional energy. So I don't think they're going to have a hard time getting what they need somewhere.
Yeah.
So to kill them, I'm not sure. There's no way for us to really tell.
Well, Ben?
I'm going to have to agree with Shane on that, because I think semantics play a lot into this, right? because speculation and saying something are two different things, right? And we're not. I honestly don't know if it's possible. And again, we could be completely wrong about this theory in the first place. We all kind of approach things through our own framework, and the framework we have just happens to be the multiple worlds interpretation of quantum physics. So I think with that in mind, our initial definition of death that we have anyway is not even really death. It's just a translation from sort of one portion of existence into another. And I think that it would kind of be, it might be the same throughout too. So I mean, even if you do quote unquote kill a parasite, that doesn't necessarily mean it's gone. It doesn't necessarily mean it's dead. I think that, death in and of itself is just a horrible sort of, a terribly defined word.
Yeah.
Because it would mean the end of existing, and does anything really ever stop existing is the next question.
No.
And so if that's the case, as we as human beings don't stop existing, then more than likely, much like, other things just don't stop existing, they just sort of change. My argument would be that they would also change.
Well, just building on what you fellows have said, there was a case. I'll give you an example of a case where dormancy, I think, could have been misinterpreted as death. Okay, for the parasite. In the case, and Ben, you were involved in the tail end of this because the case went on for 10 years.
Yeah.
Starting in 1998, you were a young tyke, and I was working in Burrillville, Rhode Island, right in our listening area here. And I've written about this case in several places. And it was a standard, kind of a textbook parasite case with two parasites, one kind of dominating the other, two different species. That's a complicated story, but it's all written down somewhere in my books. But there was anecdotal evidence from local history that the area had been quiet for long, and the people had lived there for many, many years. That had been quiet up to a certain point. But there was evidence from literature and from local historians, 17th, 18th centuries, not 17th, but 18th and 19th centuries, that there had been activity in this area, not just that house, which didn't exist at the time, but on the land. And the interpretation was this thing was attached to the land. And as soon as it didn't have anything to eat, it apparently had a spatial limitation because of the kind of land, the geotechnical factors there. And from what I could see, it couldn't leave. It went dormant, or went somewhere or someone else, greener pastures, and then all of a sudden came back when these people moved in and started feeding it. So I think that could have been interpreted as having the thing been killed, but it was just dormant. So I mean, for what that's worth, I think that's an example.
Here's a question. I don't know why out of all the years of doing this never occurred to me. But it seems as if there is a parasite involved, and I guess this is a question for the both of you, that they sort of only have a few key points in sort of, let's just say, for lack of better words, in space and time that they tend to kind of go between. If they can't get to those few points in time and space, where do they go?
Shane?
I don't. There's no way to really tell, but I mean, one thing I am sure of is that they are a life form that seems to be able to move, through parallels, and so where they actually come from. I mean, I think they're a life form that exists within the multiverse. And what they, that feeding off of our energy or I think it's a lot of emotion too, and the attention that we give these things is a huge part of it, and what they actually get from that. But then I think of like human parasites that people actually, and this does go on, and it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact that people will abduct humans and they will torture them to raise the adrenaline in their blood, and they'll drink the blood, and so it's kind of, they get a high off of it, they get a rush, and and it's disgusting, but it does happen, and it's like these things are kind of doing the same thing. They're tormenting you to get something from you, just like these human parasites do as well. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah.
We have a very interesting question, and I think it goes without saying, and everyone is writing in today. Everyone is listening. We love you, and be safe out there. Because that really made me think of that when we've got. I lost it here. It came in on the phone here. This is from Elaine in New York City, and we really think about all our friends in New York, and because that's a really, really bad hot spot right now.
Alrighty, so Elaine writes to us, "Hi guys, my name is Elaine and I live in New York City. I love your show. I know you always say to ignore negative entities so that they will move on. My question is, if I do ignore them and not let them feed off my energy, are they still able to get inside my head and read my thoughts about them? For example, do they know I'm sending this message about them?"
Shane?
Yes. So they know things that you don't even have to say out loud. So that's why I tell people if you put yourself in a paranormal situation and you act like you're not afraid, but you really are afraid, or you act happy even though you might be in a dark place, they know, and that's how they know is through emotional frequency. And I say frequency a lot because it's everything to do with this. And so that's how they're able to read thoughts, read your emotion, know how to push your buttons. I was contacted by, this is a sad story recently, but because of this virus, I'm not able to get out to her just yet, but young girl, I think 21, when she was 13, she was kidnapped, and she was put into a home where there was other kidnapped girls, and they were used as sex slaves and prostitutes and stuff, and they were, they couldn't get out, and these Johns would come to the house and do horrific things. Now, she escaped when she was 18, and it was sad because she said that for a long time she didn't want to, because she had a sisterhood. Those girls became her family, and they were looking out for each other emotionally and everything. And so, but finally she did break away. She got out of there, and she's in a relationship right now. And her current boyfriend he's being attacked. It's attacking this parasite that's with her is attacking him now. But she never told him this, but she's got PTSD from being strangled, choked. And so one night she woke up to her boyfriend choking her, and she's like screaming, and finally he wakes up. He didn't know what was going on. Something got into his dream or whatever made him act out. Her biggest fear was being choked, and that's how these things work. And now she never told him this, so they do know things. So the best thing to do is, even if you don't give it attention, it'll find other reasons. So you got to make sure that you are good emotionally. So if there's problems in your life that are bringing you down or keeping you troubled internally, do your best to work on those things and always look towards positive. And if it's hard to do, then occupy yourself physically with something positive so you can't revert back to your old dialogue, your own internal dialogue, those negative thoughts. Occupy yourself with something so you don't go back to those thoughts, but definitely work on those things: the attention, your emotional state of being, and once you get that down, you'll find out there's no reason to be afraid. Definitely, fear is a big key too. So just take control of things, and you won't have to be afraid of it either. But so that's my answer on that.
Okay.
I think I agree with Shane, but I have an angle, and the angle is this: I think it's really, really interesting, sort of from a third-party perspective, how they can sort of know things. And my theory on it is, I do kind of agree with the emotional frequency stuff, but I think it might go a little deeper than that, because, why is it that, parasites kind of take over personas of people in your life that you love? Why do they do that? And seemingly act similar to that, but just a little off. I think it's because they're aware of the multiverse, right? So they're aware that somewhere, someone, they are these people, and they can use that to their advantage. And I think that works the same with cases like this, where they believe, or not so much believe, they know. All right, well, somewhere, somewhen, I'm this person. So I know that they experienced X, Y, and Z, and I know what makes them tick. For example, Father, your experience when you were in the psych ward, and that voice came through that woman during that exorcism that knew about
I wasn't a patient. I should qualify that.
No, I know. I didn't want to go any further without,
Yes.
Yes. So a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
How would it know that?
There was a symbiotic relationship between the person being exorcised and the parasite.
Oh, yeah. There's a very clear link, whether acknowledged or unacknowledged, that this sort of tacit agreement between the host and the parasite itself. And you may acknowledge it, you may not. And I think thinking about, okay, well, is this thing reading my thoughts? Is it knowing what I'm doing? That's putting that seed of, it understands because it is you, that it knows that you're afraid. It knows that you're writing things because it knows you, because it is you somewhere, somewhen. So arguably, in that its state of awareness, being able to go into multiple worlds at once, being able to know your fears, it is an emotional response, a sort of response to, sort of, I guess, a frequency spectrum, for lack of better words, but also because it is you somewhere, somewhen. So it would know these deep, dark secrets about you. It would know your thoughts, feelings, how everything in your environment is affecting you.
Well, as if poor Elaine doesn't have enough to be afraid of living in New York City right now.
Well, that's the thing. It's not a thing to be afraid of. The thing is coming to realize it, right? One of the biggest things in any sort of spiritual, discipline is understanding yourself and understanding your world around you and seeing it for what it is.
Yes.
And seeing it for what it is makes it not scary. And understanding that, okay, this thing is me somewhere, somewhen, gives you the ability to recognize that and say, I don't want to be that somewhere, somewhen. And being able to just cut that off.
Yes. Well, also, I might qualify one thing. Because Elaine started with the idea of ignoring the thing. The time to ignore it, and we should make this clear, is at the very beginning, when it's beginning to feed. That's, if you ignore it, that's one of the ways to cut off the food supply. That can work later on too, but there comes a point where other things would have to be done, and that's where it gets really difficult. Because while there are some, I guess, good investigators out there, we've been, sort of criticized in the past for criticizing all of them, and there are some good ones.
To be fair, human beings like to speak in blanket statements all over the place.
Yes. But there are an awful lot of bozos out there who just are not going to do you any good. So the question is, where do you turn? And, I don't know. I like to think that we are good sources of information. But the bottom line, whether you get any help or not, is what Shane and Ben have both said. Keep the positive energy flowing. Cut off the food supply with that. You can do that on your own to a point, but with the support of people around you. All right, that's the thing. Ben and I always joke, we call it the Peter Pan theory. Think happy thoughts, cut off the food supply, and don't give it anything else to eat, and it will at least calm down, if not seek greener pastures. I know that sounds very simple, and it might not be, but that's where to begin, in our opinion. Anyway, so we better begin with our bottom of the hour break here. It's Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's kind of gray Blackstone Valley today. And we'll be right back, so stick with us for Open Lines.
Get down to brass tacks at home with me, Bob Vila, and my tip of the day every day right here.
Bob Vila's Home Improvement Tip of the Day can only be heard on ON, AM, and FM every weekday at 6:50 in the morning. Bob Vila's Home Improvement Tip of the Day is brought to you by Cumberland Kitchen and Bath Design Center. Bob Vila's Home Improvement Tip of the Day on ON Radio.
Okay, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's Blackstone Valley. And we're here with Open Lines today, and our favorite guest co-host, Shane Sirois, Skyping in from New Hampshire rather than coming down to the studio as he usually does because of the unpleasant circumstances going on on our planet right now. All right, so I'm thinking maybe we should go to a question from Tammy, and I'm looking at one here from Tippy from Bangor, Wales, not Bangor, Maine, Bangor, Wales. I think that's a very interesting question that Tippy asks.
I do like the name Tippy.
Yeah.
So Tippy writes to us, my house is haunted and we are being told to stay indoors, or at least to go no farther than our own gardens. I inherited the house from my parents, so I own it. I grew up here, but I never liked it. I listen to your show and read your books, so I know your ideas, which I think make a good deal of sense. So I do not think there are parasites, or not yet. There are what you might call time slips and grayish forms moving around. This happens 2 or 3 times a week. I do not feel threatened, but I do not like being watched. That's fair.
Yeah.
I know I can't be alone in this. It is like being in paranormal lockdown, quote unquote. Do you have some advice for people in my situation?
Well, I must say, it's too bad it's not 1988, because I'd be in Bangor, Wales right about now, and I could probably talk to you over the garden fence, maybe give some advice. However, that not being the case, I'm sure that there are many people who are stuck at home who are in quote-unquote haunted houses. So, Shane, what advice would you have for Tippy?
Well, I want to bring this up too. I mean, just in case, because part of what she said could be explained away by other things, and I'm not saying that that's her case, but other people listening might say, "Hey, I see gray figures in my house too, and I feel like I'm being watched." But I've run into this a million times. Homes that have uninsulated wiring or high levels of EMF inside the homes will cause shadowy movements in your peripheral. I mean, it does that. It messes up the firing between the brain and the eyes. And also that feeling of being watched, that stimulates that part of the brain, these high EMF levels. So, I wouldn't be sitting near electronics a lot. If you got like an alarm clock radio near your bed, I would move it away from your head, maybe to the other side of the room. And no electronics near your head when you sleep. Some of them don't leak, but some of them are, some of them are high. So, I mean, I would do those things regardless, but certainly, if you're sitting at home and you're always thinking about it too, if something's going to happen, you may be given that attention to the possibility of an interaction, and you most likely are going to get more activity, and you might even, you might have things pop in just for that same reason. That's why the Ouija board works, because it's a tool to focus your attention on a possibility of an interaction. If you're indoors all the time and that's all you're doing is thinking about, the ghosts or the feelings of being watched, you might draw something in. So I would stay occupied. Like we said earlier, do positive things. Go out in your garden more, if you can. But definitely stay occupied. Keep your internal dialogue occupied on positive things. And the best way to do that is do physical things that are positive. Don't just lie around and wonder what's going to happen next. But I mean, that's the best way to go about it.
Ben?
Oh, no, I totally agree. I know a few of my wife's friends who are quarantined and locked up. They're just doing a lot of projects in the house. Like, for whatever reason, they had like a bunch of stuff they wanted to do and they just never ended up doing it. So now they're like, oh, well, we have all this time, let's replace all the doorknobs in all over the house or whatever, and just, let's paint this room, that room. And, they're just keeping themselves busy with projects. And, you know what they say, this is a very strange phrase to use, but idle hands are the devil's work or whatever.
That adds new depth to that old saying. Yeah,
I mean, you have to keep yourself occupied because we are constantly thinking, whether we like to think that or not. So we're constantly dealing with thoughts that pop into our heads, and constantly being distracted by things, turning our attention all over the place. So honestly, I agree with Shane. Just have something positive to do with your time. Learn a new instrument, read a book, do some gardening.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with Shane as far as Tippy's situation and anybody else's. I've often found that over the years that many parasite cases have, and I'm glad she mentions that there doesn't seem to be anything negative going on here, but can afflict people who are homebound in the sense of ill and have a lower immunity to this kind of stuff. So I think the part about getting out in your garden and people in the UK refer to their backyard. We call them backyards. They call them gardens. It might not necessarily be like Blythewold or the Arnold Arboretum in Boston, but they tend to love their immediate surroundings of their homes, and they're wonderful people in this beautiful country. But I'd say, Tippy, get out when you can, just outside. You don't have to break the law or whatever. I'm getting conflicting stories from our relatives in the UK about what the regulations are, but you're supposed to stay home. And you can do a lot of positive things in the house or outside the house. I spend as much time outside as possible. But I think generally, you can make a go of this, and it doesn't have to be any kind of a serious problem. All right.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, Shane, did you have any questions from any of the listeners? Because sometimes they write to you.
No, nothing that pops up.
Okay, well, we got plenty here.
I've been so occupied. I may have some, but I didn't put them together.
Okay. Here's someone local here, Mark from Lincoln, Rhode Island, who has a question on something we've already discussed.
Okie dokie. So Mark writes to us, I just listened to your great show from December with Dr. David Hart. I heard, if I heard the live show, I would have called in with this question, but maybe you can answer it. If demons or parasites can be saved by God, wouldn't they have to die first? If they are fallen angels, how can angels die? This is for you. I don't know anything about.
All right, let's get theological. Okay, well, first of all, Mark, you are in luck because we traditionally do the reruns on Easter and Orthodox Easter, known as Pascha, which very often are 1 week apart, as they are this year. So on the 19th, which is Orthodox Easter or Pascha, we're going to replay that show. We thought that was appropriate. That is one of the most listened to shows we have ever done, particularly on YouTube, and because we put the recorded shows up on the podcast platforms later. So anyway, you can listen to that again. But okay, here there are some assumptions in your question, Mark, that I might question myself. One is that you have to die to go to heaven. Okay, essentially, that is not really a Christian belief. Strangely enough, if you go back to the roots of the theology, or the eschatology, as it's called in theology, the study of the last things, consideration of the last things, that's not necessarily the case, because heaven is a state of union with God. That's simplistic, and that should begin as soon as you're baptized, theoretically, or it should at least begin when some of the evangelicals or people of other persuasions might say, well, it begins when you develop a personal relationship with God, or however you define it. It begins during your life, and you don't have to die first, okay, in order for that to occur. So now I don't quite imagine some of these parasites having personal relationships with God. However you may define God.
But arguably, all of creation has a relationship with
Precisely,
God.
Yeah, and they're part of creation. We have had, not often, but now and then, a parasite that's, at least we're told by the host, will sometimes apologize for the way it has to live. And the point of the show with Dr. David Bentley Hart, which, as I say, we had in December live, and we'll have again on the 19th in this time slot, 19th of April, was that all things would have to be saved in the sense of made whole or made into the image they were supposed to be in the first place. And you could not have eternal damnation, because that would be an insult to the mercy of God. That was an ancient argument, but I'm not saying one way or the other. But that was an argument in the ancient church that kind of still, in a way, comes up now and then in the Eastern Church. And people in the West, Protestants and Catholics, tend to take that as eternal damnation as a given. I've never liked that personally. When I was in the seminary, I was a pain in the neck questioner. And so, how can we've got an infinite God condemning His own creatures, its or whatever own creatures who are finite, to eternal damnation, whatever that means, for finite sins? What kind of justice is that? I'm sorry, I've always been bothered by that. And people sometimes look at me, what's the matter with you? Well, too bad. I cannot justify any kind of God like that. I can't. Anyway, so that's not the God I worship. But anyway, that's I don't think you really have to die first. And I would refer you to previous arguments on the show, previous discussions of the question that can these things be killed? I don't think they would. It would be I think a dormancy. I don't know. I don't think there is any such thing as death because of the nature of the multiverse. Again, if that theory is correct, you can't. How can you die? There are many, many versions of yourself, including your body, and so you could argue that there really is no such thing as death, which is why we don't call it death. We call it translation, shifting of consciousness to where you already are in different forms, whatever. It's really quite mind-numbing when you think of it. It's very difficult to get your mind around. I don't know, Ben, am I making any sense here?
No, I get what you're saying.
Oh, no, thank you.
I mean, maybe I'm the only one who gets it. No, I totally understand, and I think it comes from a standpoint that a lot of people in the modern world. I had this discussion with my buddy the other day, who's also who's from India, so he kind of gets it. But I use the terms Western and modern interchangeably, which is probably not fair. So we'll just say, the modern perspective of the afterlife is rather bleak and depressing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, well, you depending on your sort of theological background and kind of how you view it, the sort of relationship between the divine and human is very abstract. Even if you are sort of in that evangelical realm, it still is kind of an abstract. Whereas, if you look at old school teachings, participating in the divine nature of the divine basically is a given. It's a part of existence, and through it you are reoriented. And if you are reoriented, you reorient all things around you. So the argument would essentially be that through participating in the divine and participating in something outside of yourself, it's not just yourself that's reoriented, it's all things that are reoriented. And that's essentially the goal, is that, heaven's not this abstract thing that's in the sky. It is here now. In an invisible reality that you can participate in, right? So
it can be visible too,
right?
So we're not the island theory here. That's what we're always
and even then, it's like some of the mistranslations in sort of defining one's relationship with other humans. Like if you look back at some of like the early Christians and their sort of explanations for hell, it was very like esoteric, right?
Yeah.
So like. There was a story about a monk who was just walking around in the desert and he found a skull and he poked the skull and the skull started talking to him and he was like, oh well, what's hell like? And he was like, we're bound back to back with our eyes blindfolded and we can't see each other. And that was what it was described like, that your sort of relationship with other human beings is just completely separate and you are utterly alone.
See, Elaine and Tippy, there's always somebody with more paranormal problems than you have.
Yeah, I mean, in that, it's so different than being burned alive at the stake. It's like...
Yeah, there are mistranslations. All kinds
but in that, getting back to the point being is that how you view sort of existence is in how it's defined by Dr. Bentley Hart. And his sort of perspective and, that he's resonated from, about 1,500-ish years ago, is how people experienced life then. And how people lived then is really not too different than how it is now. Really the only major difference is technology. If anything, we're a little dumber.
Yes.
But, in that, how people live their lives, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, whatever years ago, it's still roughly the same.
Well, I'm going to pause for a news bulletin here. We don't even get to do that. Just some good news from New York. The governor of New York says that the number of coronavirus deaths in the state has had its first daily drop. I don't know about New York City, but New York State. I think that's great news after we just share that. So
that's good.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's more than. So Shane, any further comments here?
Yeah. Actually, I don't come into this work. I don't go towards it with traditional religious background or belief or nothing like that. I'm spiritual in everything, but one thing to consider, and I'm not saying I believe that this is to be the case, but it's something to strongly consider. So, we chop a chicken's head off, rip its feathers out, and we eat it. We kill a pig and we eat the pork, all this other stuff, and that's how we live. But, what if these things, that's how they have to live, is to feed off of us? And so, it is to kind of think about heaven or hell is how they are acting evil. Maybe that's how they have to survive. We just don't know. There's some type of, they are definitely a life form, and if that's how they need to survive, then, how do we judge that? You know what I mean?
We can't, and that's something that is sort of a part of existence, is that we have these sort of inherent biases, and we will always look at something as if, all right, well, this is like me, but if it read more books or whatever, and we look at it from a perspective of judging it from us.
Well, on the other hand, if a mosquito was sucking the blood out of my arm, I'm not going to not swat it.
Well, no, exactly.
Yeah. So we have a caller.
We do.
I believe it is Tom Spitaleri, our good friend. Tom, you finally reached me on the phone. Yeah, I don't take calls when I'm on deadline, and poor Tom's been trying to communicate, and
I
so
was checking up on all my friends. What a weird time we're living in now.
Isn't it strange?
Changing out there. I mean, I've been helping people over the phone. I know you guys have been busy helping people out. Shane, you've been busy too, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, I have.
Helping people out. This doesn't stop. It's just, you got to change what we're doing.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So you're kind of breaking up there. You all right?
Oh. No, I just wanted to call in and quick say hi. That's real quick, because it was near the end of the show. Just to say hi and wish all those investigators that are still helping people out the best of luck.
Very good. Well, thank you, Tom. That's a good thought, and we echo that.
No problem. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you.
Okay. I think we might have time for one more question. This is from Michelle in Austin, Texas.
Sure.
Third one down, Ben.
Alrighty, so Michelle writes to us, I'm hearing a lot of people say that the coronavirus is being spread by chemtrails. Have you heard anything like this? What do you guys think? Who would be doing this and what for?
All right, well, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of pilots. I have some experience with private aviation myself. I think the chemtrail thing, I've never seen any evidence that it's true. And what the chemtrail thing is very often you look up in the sky and you see an aircraft going by, and there's a long tail of smoke coming out, and it's a contrail, a condensation trail. And so sometimes it can expand. It has been known to form to affect the weather in a minor way by forming clouds, but people say, aha, it's the government seeding mind control chemicals on us. And who knows? I mean, I believe anything.
I don't think they need chemicals for mind control.
No, not at all. And I don't put a lot of stock in the chemtrail thing. Shane, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do research everything, and I did find a pretty credible source where it was actually admitted that they do chemtrails for certain reasons, mostly weather related and other things like that they've admitted to. Now, could they do it for something else like this? Sure. I mean, actually, if you're going to spread a virus, that would be the best way to do it. I mean, I hear the theories that it's the New World Order trying to lessen the population, you know what I mean? So there's all kinds of crazy theories out there or whatever, but, I don't think that's the case right now. I don't think they're spreading it through chemtrail, but that certainly would be the most effective way, probably. So let's not give them any ideas.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think I've never been a conspiracy theorist either, but I have to say I think I'm getting there. It's just looking at all things as they are today. I don't know, but that's not a subject for this show right now, anyway. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you there, Michelle. I don't think that's necessarily what's happening. Why would they need to do that? Flying like that is expensive. All they have to do is rely on people's inability or unwillingness to follow the rules of social distancing and things, which I think is very smart. And anyway, that's I don't know if we can say any more about that. So we have a very interesting report from
Yeah, we got a little bit.
Phil. Yeah, no, Phil, our reporter, one of our reporters in Connecticut, in the Litchfield Triangle area, lives right there, that there have been some interesting things going on in the sky.
Righty. Phil writes to us, there have been some weird lights in the night sky around midnight the past few nights. 3 lights in a triangle pattern to the northeast of my home, which is by coincidence, where the Goshen Triangle is up at up by East Street in Goshen. Of course, it could be nothing, but it is new. I look forward to your program this Sunday.
Everything goes today. Well, thank you, Phil. It's very interesting, and Phil and I have communicated. He's going to attempt, because it's been cloudy, as it has been here, because that's only about 2 hours west of here, here in Rhode Island, and it's been cloudy. But he's going to try to get the old camera ready, and as much as he can, maybe see if we can get a couple of pictures of it. I have checked the MUFON reports. Sightings do seem to be way up. Maybe it's because people are at home and have nothing better to do. But
that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they have more. I should say not nothing better to do, but more leisure to observe the sky. Shane, what have you been hearing? What's going on in New Hampshire, and what have you been hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been about the same around this area for the last 2 to 3 years. It's been pretty active. I get a lot of reports from the locals and people around, and I certainly have seen quite a lot, and one right over my driveway right before we left to the Pennsylvania case in May, which was the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life in the sky. But
Until
certainly,
you got to Pennsylvania.
Well, actually, the one I saw above my house was more amazing.
Really?
More strange. That's
wow.
a better word.
Yeah.
It was because it wasn't like, maybe I never described this on the show, but it wasn't like a craft, and it wasn't like a disc like we saw the disc come out of that light figure or whatever that was, like a like white, like you said, like a white hole or whatever, but it was almost like a plasma, weird substance, anyways. And but this was a circle. It was probably the size of a car, but it was perfectly round, and it was 3-dimensional. So it was like a tube, like those old round fluorescent light bulbs. But it was perfectly solid and perfectly white, and it was all the way around with the hole in the middle, and it was standing up on end. Kind of diagonal from where I was standing, about 30 feet. It was about 30 to 40 feet above my driveway, not far from where I was standing on my back deck.
Pretty close.
What was strange was I was sitting there, I was standing on my deck, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, and it was these are just thoughts in my head. I'm thinking to myself, it's been a while since I've seen a UFO, which is weird because I was seeing so many of them, and a voice that wasn't my own said, "Turn around and look behind you." And I turned around and looked behind me, and that's what I saw. And just as I was reaching for my phone, it moved forward about another, about 30 feet forward, as it shrunk in size until it was just gone. I mean, it was just sort of like till it was nothing. Wow. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. It wasn't a cloud. It was a solid object, and yeah, I mean, I've seen craft-looking things in the sky, but in discs. But this, I don't know what this was, but it was weird, and I promise you, it talked to me. It was bizarre.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, we're pretty much out of time for questions, but Shane, could you tell us what you're up to, where people can find out more about you?
Yeah, trueghost.com is my website. My contact information is there. And because of this virus, everything that was scheduled is canceled. So,
yeah, us too. Although we are working on, for our YouTube channel, something that might be a charity related, and Shane will get involved in that. He doesn't know it yet, but we'll get him in on that.
He does now.
Yeah. We're also, the group of us that was pretty much in Pennsylvania, plus Ben is working on a UFO book. We're going to, we'll be telling you more about that. We'd hope to have that ready for our fall events. Hopefully there'll be fall events. But also involved will be Steve LaPlume from the Rendlesham case. He's going to be contributing a chapter and saying some things about that he hasn't. Shane, of course. Hopefully Alexander Petikoff and Charles Credo as well. So our whole kind of crazy gang will be involved in that. So, okay, well, why don't we move on to our announcements at this point?
Sure.
And thank you, everyone, for writing in. And please stay safe. And let's hope for that the good news from New York will continue. So, again, as we just said, all our planned spring events have been canceled because of the global pandemic. However, We are working on this YouTube presentation. Ben and I will give you more information on that as we go. Keep an eye on our social media pages, Facebook, our personal Facebook pages, Paul Eno, Ben Eno, and the show Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno Facebook page as well, where you can also find that amazing video from 2010 when Ben and I got the thing in the tree, which is pretty interesting. We do hope that all this will have blown over by fall, as we say. We can get back to the Exeter UFO Festival on Labor Day weekend, September 5th and 6th, as speakers, and to do our 5th annual live broadcast of this show from the historic Exeter Town Hall on Sunday the 6th at noon. The event is sponsored by the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club to raise funds for local children's charities, and they do a great job.
We also hope to be back at the Greater New England UFO Conference in Leominster, Massachusetts. That's on Columbus Day weekend in October. My dad will be the keynote speaker to mark his 50th anniversary in paranormal research. Happy anniversary, Dad.
Gee, thanks, Ben.
Also in October, you can look for us on the Travel Channel, and we can't say any more about that.
Check out our books, including Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, and Behind the Paranormal 2, Bigfoot, Mothman, and Monsters You Never Heard Of. And now, Dancing Past the Graveyard, Poltergeists, Parasites, Parallel Worlds, and God. They're available from online retailers, Amazon, of course, too, and in some stores. But for autographed copies, please visit the online bookstore at BehindTheParanormal.com, and you can get them there. Also at that website, you can find out more about the show, our many cases over the years, and get some of the... We can get all the links to some of the recent videos and also the recorded shows. However, they're not all up on the site. You need to go to the podcast platforms, iTunes, YouTube, and all the rest of them, and you can find shows back. We're getting them all up there, but we're back to almost 2009 right now, and we'll get the 2009 and 2008 shows up there as soon as we can, but all the rest are there. Okay, so, Ben, charities?
Yes, so there are links to several charities on our show website, including USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero. And don't forget about the Milk Fund here in Northern Rhode Island.
So what do we have next week, the next 2 weeks, Ben?
So the next 2 weeks, on April 12th and 19th, as we do every year, we'll bring you rebroadcasts because of both Western and Eastern celebrations of Easter, respectively. On April 12th, we will replay the Blockbuster show from February with Murray Silver, defeating parasites. And on the 19th, we'll rebroadcast one of the most popular shows we've ever done from December last year, Will Satan Be Saved, with theologian Dr. David Bentley Hart.
Okay, and we'll be back live on here on ON 1240 and 99.5 FM on April 26th with a look at the strange life of journalist and Mothman chronicler John Keel. No time for a quote. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno.
And I'm Shane Stairway. Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you behind the paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.